This is for Algebra 2. This is the money assignment. For the first page, we're looking at the basic form of exponential functions being y equal a times b to the x. A and b are both constants. We want to know what effect they have in the tables. So what we learned before, if you have y equal 3 times 2 to the x, a is 3 and b is 2. If you were to put this in your calculator at y equal, you would say 3 times 2 rooftop x, and then you would go to your graph, your table, and if x is 0, y is 3, if it's 1, 6, etc. So that's where you're going to get these numbers. 0, 3, 1, 6, 2, 12, 3, 24, and 4, 48. So to get your ratio, you would say I did 3 times 2. I did 6 times 2. I did 12 times 2. And I did 24 times 2. So my ratio here is 2. If I had y equal 2 times 3 to the x, a is 2, b is 3. If I put that into my calculator at y equal and went to my table, I would discover that for x being 0, y is 2, 1, 6, 2, 18, 3, 54, and 4, 162. That's just coming from the table on your calculator. You would have to multiply 2 times 3 to get 6, 6 times 3 for 18, 18 times 3 equal 54, and 54 times 3 equal 162. If you weren't sure what that should be, you could have done it backwards and divided and said like 162 divided by 54, and then 54 divided by 18, and just worked it from the bottom up. Looking at number 3, we have y equals 6 to the x. When there's not a number in front, your a is 1 and your b is 6. Go to y equal, put this in, 6 rooftop x, and you're going to go to your table. 0, 1, 1, 6, 2, 36, 3, 2, 16, and 4, 12, 96. Once again, you could do it backwards. You could say 12, 96 divided by 2, 16. And that should give you 6. 216 divided by 36 is 6. 36 divided by 6 is 6. And 6 divided by 1 is 6. If you have 8 times 0.5 to the x, a is 8, b is 0.5. Go to y equal and put it in and look at your table, and you're going to have 0, 8, 1, 4, 2, 2, 3, 1, and 4.5. To figure out your ratio, either figure out what you're multiplying by, or you could say 0.5 divided by 1, and you would get 0.5. 1 divided by 2, 0.5. 2 divided by 4, 0.5. 4 divided by 8, 0.5. 100 times 0.5 to the x, a is 100, b is 0.5. Put this in your calculator at y equal and look at your table. You discover that you have 0, 100, 150, 225, 3, 12.5, and 4, 6.25. Your ratio here is 0.5. Number 6, you have 200 times 0.8 to the x. Your a is 200, your b is 0.8. Put it into y equal, look at your table, and you have 0, 200, 1, 160, 2, 128, 3, 102.4, and 4, 81.92. So your ratio here is 0.8. Once again, if you're not sure, you would say 81.92 divided by 102.4, and that's where you would get your 0.8. So looking at all of that, okay, looking at each one of those, where does the a value show up in the table? Well, a is 3. Here's my 3. A is 2. Here's my 2. A is 1. Here's my 1. The a shows up next to the 0, okay, or as the value of y when x is 0. Or the table contains the point 0, comma a. Those are all saying the same thing. So if you stop and think about it, it's actually your y-intercept. So then what effect does the b value have? So look at what your b is, okay? On this one it's 2. Where do you see 2 show up? This one is 3. Where do you see 3 show up? 6, where does that show up? 0.5, where does that show up? Okay, your B value is going to be what provides the pattern. It's what you multiply each time to make it go up or down to the next number. So it is what your ratio is. Moving to the next page. For functions in the form y equal a times b to the x, a is the initial amount or starting value, also known as your y-intercept. B is the ratio between terms, or what you multiply by. It's kind of like what we think of as slope, maybe. Y values increase if b is greater than 1, and they decrease if b is a fraction between 0 and 1. Okay, so use what we've just discovered to write the function rules that could generate these tables. Think about it. If we had this table, let's go over here. We have this table, 0, 5, 120. Okay, what are we doing each time? Once again, you could say 1280 divided by 320. And you should get 4. 320 divided by 80, 4. 80 divided by 20, 4. 20 divided by 5, 4. Okay, we should be able to look at this to know our A and our B. Remember, A is a number next to 0, so it's 5. B is our ratio, so it's 4. So you can take that to make an equation. And it's going to be y is equal to 5 times 4 to the x. So on this one, you know your A is 2 because that's what's with the 0. What are we doing each time? What are we multiplying by? Well, we're multiplying by 9. And that means my B is 9, which means my equation is 2 times 9 to the x. We know my A is with the 0, so it's 16. This is one that you may want to punch in your calculator, 81 divided by 54, to see what we're multiplying by each time, and it's going to be 1.5, which means that my B is 1.5, which makes my equation y is equal to 16 times 1.5 to the x. Number 10, A is the number with 0, so it's 500. You're going to want to punch in 12.8 divided by 32, and you discover your ratio is 0.4, which means B is 0.4, which means that your equation is 500 times 0.4 to the x. So looking over here, they tell me it's 4 times 1 to the x, so I know that my 0 is going to go with 4 because that's my A. What if B was equal to 1? What's going to happen each time? Well, 4 times 1 is 4, times 1 is 4, times 1 is 4. So if your base is 1, these are all going to be the same. Y equal 4 times negative 2. What happens when your base is a negative number? Well, we know that for 0 it has to be 4 because that's my A value. And then the B is what I'm multiplying every time. So 4 times negative 2 is negative 8, times negative 2 is 16, times negative 2 is negative 32. So why don't we usually use these values? Because they're weird. Okay, they don't work right. So you're not going to see one with 1 as your base, and you're not going to see one with a negative number as your base, because it makes weird things happen. Going to the next page. If you had a college loan to help with the cost of tuition, room, and board, you take out a loan of $20,000 for college. You do not have to make any payments on the loan until you leave school. However, the loan amount accumulates interest at the rate of 12% annually. To determine how much you will owe after X years of school, complete the table and graph. Round answers to the nearest whole dollar. So my starting amount, okay, your starting amount is what you borrowed, $20,000. That always goes with 0. So then if it's going to accumulate interest at 12% after 1 year, I owe $22,400. After 2 years, $25,088. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and 6 years. Take a minute and fill that in. So then if you were to plot those points, it would look something like this. If you're confused about where these numbers came from, we multiplied by 1.12 every time, and that came from our 12%. So what function rule can be used to find the amount you will owe in student loans after staying in school for X years? Well, what was A? 20,000. And what is my rate? 12%. So 20,000 times 1.12. The reason it's 1.12 is you've got to have the 1 to keep your 20,000 going, and then you've got your 0.12 for the 12%. So suppose after graduating college you enter law school. How much would be owed after a total of 8 years in school? So you would just continue your table or use your equation at y equal, and it would be $49,519. Suppose after graduation you decide to go on to medical school. So what would you owe after 12 years in college? It'd be 20,000 times 1.12 to the 12th, which is 77,920. What is the domain and the range? Domain is your x values, and so it would be greater than or equal to 0 because you've got to start with 0 as the smallest number of years. And the range, the least you can owe is 20,000, so it's greater than or equal to 20,000. So car value is similar. The starting value of your car is 20,000. It loses 20% each year. Okay, so if it loses 20%, it's going to keep 80%. So your A is 20,000 and your B is 0.8 because of 80% of the value that it keeps. So 20,000 times 0.8 is 16,000, times 0.8 is 12.8, times 0.8 is 10,240, etc. So take a minute, fill in your table, plot your points on your graph. So how much will the car be worth after 10 years or after 25 years? You just use this formula, but x has to be 10 and then 25. So after 10 years, it's going to be $21.47, and in 25 years, the value is going to be $76. According to this function, when will the car be worth absolutely nothing? And this is never, because you will never get an answer of 0. It's a limit. It's a horizontal asymptote. Domain for this is going to be greater than or equal to 0, and range is going to be less than or equal to 20,000. Also has to fall between 0 and 20,000 because it shows that it will, reach that limit and never actually be 0. Next page. This is looking at growth and decay. The general formula is written over here in the top left. A is your original amount. R is the percentage. You use plus if it's going up, minus if it's going down. T is your time. And then Y of T is the amount of after T years. So following that formula, right now the population is 25,000. However, it's expected to increase. So starting point and then increase by 8%. So your A is going to be 25,000. Your B is 1.08 because it was increased and we added it. So then you would just put that into Y equal and fill in your table. And after 4 years, 34,012 people. Mr. McDonald just bought a tractor for 60,000. It's going to depreciate. Depreciation means that your value is going down. So your A is 60,000 and your B is 0.82. You get your 0.82 by saying 100% minus 18%. You get 82, and it has to be a decimal because it's percent. You put that into Y equal, go to your table, and so after 4 years, it's worth 27,127. Manufacturing plant sends 50,000 of cubic feet of CO2 in the atmosphere annually. They agree to cut the emissions. That's going to be a decrease. So your A, or starting point, is 50,000, and then your B is going to be 0.88, which would be 100 minus 12. Put that into Y equal, fill in your table, and there's your answer for that one. Invested 5,000 4 years ago. It's now 6312. What is the approximate rate of return? Well, we know that the A is 5,000. To get your B, you would do like 5,300 divided by 5,000 so that you know what the B is. Now, then you've got to add that to the 1 to keep up with your original. Okay, it's going up each time, so it's 1 plus the 0.06. So 6% is your answer here. This takes you to your assignment. If you have any questions, call me over.